Welcome. Thank you for sitting down with me and joining us for this conversation.
It's good to be with you.
So we are in this series where we are exploring these themes of rage, grief, and goodness. When you hear these three things, these three feelings, what comes up for you? Or where does that land for you? And what is your first response?
Well, Gretchen, right off the bat, I think the word that caught me was the word grief. I believe we've been in grief for several months and maybe the last couple of years, and we didn't know what we were experiencing because we couldn't put a finger on it. But grief is that emotion that we often don't rightly are able to identify. I just gravitated toward that word, that we're still in grief of all the major changes, a pandemic, justice issues, government issues. We've just been in a myriad of emotional upheaval, and I too have been there. And then I moved toward the word of rage. How long will we have to try to make our way through all the questions and all of the ugly things and expressions and feelings that we are going through, and to be in a world or a country, just say a country, that can't seem to see the value of the humanity of the total body. That just has just brought me to even more rage, if I just go ahead and use the word, that what's it going to take for us to see the value in our neighbor? I always tell myself, I try to peddle that to people every Sunday when I'm in the pulpit, about the inherent goodness of people, and that there are people who are striving to make a difference. Pre-pandemic, I think we were all on just a rhythm of life. You did your routines had worked for you. Not to say that everything was well and everything was perfect, but I think that was expected. So there wasn't a whole lot of great surprises. But by time we moved into the early 20s, and the pandemic really started to raise its head, but we are also confronted by the George Floyd situations. It threw us out of our normal way of examining life, and we haven't come back yet. As much as we want to, we haven't found our equilibrium, and that's frustrating the crap out of people, excuse the wording, but people are frustrated that they can't grab their lives back to control. And so, and for some who have already bore huge amounts of inconsistencies, be they racial or economic or medical, this was just a compound to it, so it just ratcheted you up to what's next, because we thought we had, in my community, we thought we had already hit the top of the mountain. Well, we found out that there were a couple of more levels to the floor. People are just trying to deal with this uncertainty at a level that they've never had to before. Our grief has been compounded because of the loss of so many brothers and sisters, cousins, aunts, mothers, because of the effect of this pandemic. We've lost people, even though they were not in our immediate church, but our families are interconnected. So when we lose somebody's mother, you might as well have been a mother in our church.
Frances Waller, she talks about the idea of making an apprenticeship with sorrow. And like you learn it as your companion that is your life teacher.
Yes.
And so what I hear in what you're describing is your community's been learning a lot of lessons these days. And we all are, that we're in a deep mode of learning,
Yes.
and learning is actually awful in a lot of ways. It's
Yes.
deeply uncomfortable. It is the equilibrium that you're wanting, is the people you're describing, is not accessible. If you're going to learn, you can't have equilibrium.
Right.
I was wondering if you're finding ways to help people, or if you have found ways to help people to embrace the learning. How do we move out of resistance, devastation, whatever tools we have for
Yeah.
compartmentalizing, avoidance, maladaptive behaviors, into learning?
This period of time have challenged me also to speak into people's lives from my pulpit, from where people are, and I say that not as if I wasn't doing that, but a lot of times in church, people get this storyline that those who follow the life of Christ, or the life of our Creator, your world is perfect. And so all of our songs talk this perfect language. It talk about the great celebration, the great something. And I'm constantly, they probably says, he's the most anti Christian man I've ever seen, because I'm going, that's not life. Life, life is not one big party. And the day and time that we're in, I think it is more important to give people tools to survive, or to at least be able to somehow analyze the world that they're in and make sense as best as they can. And when they can't, and I have to tell them that there are times when I don't make sense of my today's reality. Just our conversation earlier, I can't make sense of that. That just is off my scale. But I'm still called to be a part of this human life. We as a people find strength in one another to help make sense of that is questionable or uncomfortable. But that has been one of the major roles and the place of the church in African Americans' life since we've had the church, or access to the church.
That part of the tools for staying open to the lessons, to the learning, is knowing that this is life.
This is life.
So it's not like, well, we'll get to the other side of this and then I'll,
No,
that
we
in this
have to.
life, that it is that we learn how to help each other and be present with each other for these experiences, but we're not getting out of it.
No. And for some people, they will come into your midst, and that's not the storyline they want to hear. They want the magic potion. They want, hey, Reverend, give me something that will help me not feel what I feel. And my return answer is, that's not life.
You know, I have a question for you that I wasn't thinking I would want to talk to you about, but it really, as you're talking, it really comes to mind. My predecessor at Foothills, he was served for 23 years. How long have you been at your church?
This will be my 33rd year.
Oh, David, bless you. So one of the things he told me as he was retiring was, and people always talks about him as the hard part of it was the work, how hard it was to pastor a church, to show up in all the ways for all the people all the time, many, many years, the things we all know about the work of ministry. But he said that is not the thing that made him feel so eager to retire and ready to retire. What the thing that was hard for him was the accumulation of loss, and that church for him was an experience of accumulated loss. You come to love someone, and either they die or they leave or they are mad or they're something. So what my question is for you, David, is how do you, in your 30 years, how have you managed that accumulated loss?
Oh man, that's a great question. I just thank you for even framing that question because it is real. I don't think you arrive at how to handle it early because in your early years in your pastorate, you have this idea, I'm going to do ministry different. I'm going to, I've listened, I've learned, I've trained, I've read every book on keeping a healthy congregation. And so you go into the water pretty dry. But once in the water, that loss takes such a toll on you that you don't realize the depth of it until the water is very high in your life. And by that time, you're looking at, I'm not drowning yet, but it's scary because to invest in another life means to give up something in you. To invest in a community means to give up something from you. And every time you invest, the greatest reward is to see it restructure or reawaken in someone else or into a concept. And those are life-giving, but a lot of our lives is waving goodbye. And I tell people now, I had to play like I was okay with saying goodbye. Because if I didn't, I would be a less than leader. But every time someone leaves, a piece of me is ripped away.
But there's something about that you say that's a part of church too, that
Yes.
we're learning that you love someone, as you say, like you invest in somebody and they're a part of you, but you always have the risk they're going to go
Yes.
for whatever reason. That's always a part of what it means. You're investing. What do you say about the water coming up? I think that's like love and life, and
It's
you're jumping
all.
in and suddenly you don't realize it, but like, oh wow, I'm in the water.
I'm in the water.
It doesn't matter
I'm
what
deep.
and there's no protecting yourself at that point. You're just,
No.
and so you learn, how that you move through that is actually an opportunity of church too.
Yes. I think you hit it very well. It's sharing with people that loss is a part of life.
And so I'm wondering about is that grief you're describing. How and where do you see it showing up as it connects back to that collective anger or rage that we see playing out culturally right now?
Mhm.
And how are you seeing this playing out in people's lives? When, how are you ministering to that?
Yeah, I think it's showing in a myriad of ways. One, I watched the appearance of families. I watch how are families interacting, how are they getting along. I just see families even acting out greater than I have seen over periods of my ministry. Sadly, I've seen more divorces this this last 2 3 years at one time of people that I thought never would divorce, people that I thought had it all together. I've watched the family dynamic really shake up, that people are shorter tempered or less likely to give the benefit of the doubt. There's this discord in family. So I'm called more often to mediate in situations like that. Pastor, will you listen? We are just not, I'm going, oh my God. But what you hear is, I think, again, in people's grief, until you deal with some of your true root causes of your pain, you're masking it. And a lot of people have masked their if their behaviors, their views of life, but there were really some turbulent things going on at home that they never dealt with. And so now to be laid off, to get, some of my people, to be laid off just complicates it. First, we were arguing when both of us were working, and we were but now we lost the house, or we lost something of very high value, and that just gave opportunity to have more and more anger toward each other. And then the children, which I've had more conversation from children, or not conversation with children, but Gretchen, I have been in mediation court systems for families asking me about families. Then I'm going, how many of these do I have to sit in, that people that I thought were somewhat healthy, they're just unraveling. They're just unraveling. And so my goal, what I'm trying to tell leaders is that what we are seeing, what I'm seeing in the pew, is not always what's really happening in the human psyche. There are people who are struggling, but they know how to come to church. They know how to serve on a board, but they don't know how to ask for help. I find myself not so much preaching as an old boy. I find myself really being a father, or an uncle, or an old person who says, tell me what's really going on. And you just see tears. You just see tears just running. And this is men and women. So I guess I said all this to say, what we are finding is that the church, we're finding during this grieving time, this grief is so impactful that the church is really having to make a decision. How is it going to really serve its people for real right now? Not for how pretty can we make the sanctuary, but how are we really going to serve both inside the building and outside? So we're being called to task right now. Yeah.
Amen. I'm going to talk specifically about Fort Collins, the city we live in. I don't know if you've been following at all the various school board meetings around town. Loveland, Windsor, Fort Collins school board meetings, and the rage. I would have to say rage that's on display there. As you think about our community, the particular context that you and I serve in and lead in what ways do you see that those forces as particular to Fort Collins? What's different about the way that rage or grief plays out here?
The first word that comes to my mind with that question is surprise. You can fool yourself into a narrative that we all get along. We are all good people. We just love mowing the lawn together. We like living next door to each other. We go hiking together. What I see in Fort Collins is people are surprised to hear some of the conversations and the words that are coming from, and I'll say it, a neighbor. And that is totally rocking this community, because there was this idea that we're not Denver, we are not Boulder, we are not Colorado Springs, and God forbid we're not Chicago, we're not Los Angeles. All of the places that they are not, they found out they have roots here. And so even though you're not there, you have some of their ideologies, You have some of their philosophies. You have all of the trappings of what you said you did not have. So that, I mean, that's how I have come to grips with what we are hearing and seeing. And when, you know, people are talking about these meetings and how people are speaking so uncomfortably to each other and the tensions that are there, I don't think this is new. What I believe is people didn't know that they had a ramp to open that conversation they could take to let it out. And in these last some years, I'll just say in these last 2, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever, people have taken permissions that we ordinarily wouldn't have taken as a human society. But we found out that there is some approval when you take certain positions and you take them out loud, disregarding the humanness of your neighbor. And so we went ahead and crossed the line. We crossed the line and says, you do not value your neighbor because your neighbor has now become is no longer your neighbor. Your neighbor is now your enemy. And so because we have relabeled each other, you are my neighbor and my friend as long as you agree with me. Point and simple. And we don't know what to do with that. Fort Collins doesn't know what to do with that. We thought we were just intelligent and smart, rich enough that we wouldn't deal with that. We can have a board meeting and get through it and be done. And so all of this has surprised us because we are now parts of camps that says either you're for me or you're against me. There's nothing in between. And so that to me is the new giant in our community. It is, we have no idea how to talk to or to listen to our neighbor, or he's no longer neighbor, our enemy. And so we're frustrated as heck that would be in our community. And that's number one for me, is we're surprised. Secondly, we forgot, or this community now is experiencing some discomforts, just regular discomforts that it thought again that it would not have to confront. Be it political, we used to, I hate to say we used to, but you used to could vote across lines. You really vote in the integrity of a person. We don't vote in integrity anymore. We vote strictly by national partyism. We vote strictly, I don't even know who's running for something, but he's one of my parties. That's the person, which is crazy to me. That means we have lost the ability of critical thinking. We've lost the ability to listen to someone else. We don't have the ability to say, in my opinion, anymore. We only talk as if my words are total truth. And so that then will cause fracture in community. And so our community now is actually splitting because everybody is saying, I know what's best to the nth degree for us. And the other person is saying, no, I know what I have to do at church is to clean up that mess. That's what I'm clean. I'm the big janitor right now. And I'm still speaking about the humanity and the goodness of the human being, of the spark of goodness in everyone. And people are still saying, but I'm going, no, we're not going to sink to that level of living in this community. And I am not about to tell people, you just accept everything, but we are not going to fight fire with fire. We're not going that route. But see, that's a whole new level for me. It's the level of why I follow the Creator. It is, I'm trying to move people that now maybe some of this crazy stuff y'all heard me preach over 30 years about even loving your enemy, that this is what we're called to do in this moment. And so people are saying, but can't you give us a better sermon? Can't you give us something different? And I'm going, no, I can't allow you to teach your children to hate and make another generation of that. I won't, and I can't do it. But I think, Gretchen, this is what is happening in our community. We are so surprised that we are just as mediocre as anybody else. We are flawed like anybody else. Our money did not fix us. Our affluence didn't fix us. But what we found out is we stopped caring and listening and honoring and respecting our neighbor, and we don't know what to do with it. So the church, to me, is saying, let's go back to square one. And let's start seeing even the person I don't agree with as a person who has value. And who knows, they may teach me something that I never thought of, or give me an opinion that I never thought of. I don't have to change who I am, but I know our approach is not working right now. And I'm afraid for the next generation. I'm so afraid for the next generation. And as an old man, I'm saying, Lord, please, please, please let people my age stop being total idiots. Because I just think we are flaming idiots right now. And what we're pushing into our children is not going to serve us well for some of the progress we've made. And I don't think we are nowhere near the end, but at least for some of the progress we've made, we are helping roll the ball backwards. So there is an opportunity for the church to actually live out its message. And that should be small, but I think we are brought to that place where we now are challenged to live out that message of mending and not tearing. See, I love that even in my own little mind. We should be menders right now, not part of those who are tearing apart. And when the church loses that insight, it loses its effectiveness. And I think maybe the church is given an opportunity to step back into its identity that it might have shed over some decades and maybe some centuries, that the Creator is giving us this opportunity to reclaim our message. And so I don't want to help people tear apart, but it's work though, Gretchen. This is the work the church said it was called to be, that light in the world to be. And so now you got a flashlight. Do you turn the thing on or do you have batteries? You know, the thing is, you got the torch, but does it work? And I think people want to know, they want to see hope in another way. And we claim that we have a hope for the world. Then I'm going to get out there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually where I wanted to end, is on the hope. In this moment, where would you say is your source of hope? Easy.
I believe in people who are doing good. I get a smile, or I think around the world, not just in my congregation, but there are so many people that I will discover and hear their contributions in their communities, in their work, in their jobs, and their churches, their mosques, whatever, that I am reminded that God has placed into many people, and they're waking up to their call. They're waking up to their mission. And I had an invitation this week. I met a lady from India. She is a professor over at CSU, and we had this. I just told her it was a divine appointment. And she said, just thank you for sharing with me. I go, no. Because she, even in her academic, she still sees her mission is to human trafficking. And we talk, And in my lingo, if she had given an invitation to join church, I would have joined her church. I was so taken by her glow. And I honestly, Gretchen, I say this as we close, I believe there are people around the world, locally, nationally, who are that same lady. And I believe they are part of the change agents, and they are part of keeping and moving this world in the universe. That's what gives me hope every day. I just see that, and it makes me smile. And all of the craziness and the darkness and the screamers, I see people who are touching lives and making differences that the world is going to benefit for years, if not centuries to come.
The menders.
The menders, they are the menders.
Yeah.
They are mending. And I smile when I see them, because I know it's, and not that I call myself one of them, I just know evil is not going to be the last story. It's not going to be the last chapter. But I think evil's going to do a great piece of work, as it is doing, but I don't see it being the closing chapter.
Thank you, David.
Thank you for letting me.
So appreciate our conversation. I could talk for another hour, but we should probably close it off.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you, Foothills. That's why I jumped at it. Thank you. I love when people just let us be real.